Ready, set, go.
Welcome to The Sweet Spot, an Up Dog podcast. I'm Andrea Morissette.
And I am Jack Faley, and we are your hosts today.
We have a guest today.
Yeah, all right.
We have Preat Matteson as our guest today. Woo woo! Give it up for Di. Di, why are you here?
Has hands. Huh?
Why are you here?
I don't know, because you know, I'm
I
just
asked
here
you.
to kind of help fill the void.
Yeah. So you posted a great question on the Updog discussion page recently, or actually, no, not discussion page.
No.
You messaged a few of experienced handlers in a group.
Yes.
And you sent us all this random message. No one was expecting it. All of a sudden, Di pops up, like 10 different players, and she asked for photos of successful vaults, like good photos of successful vaults.
Yeah.
And so all of us randomly responded and just started throwing pictures in this chat of us doing vaults. And that
Let me go back. She asked for one picture.
I
And
got a
two of
lot
us
of pictures.
Gave multiple pictures, okay?
And
Two of
some
us.
people blitz them with picture.
Over delivered. Okay.
I'd rather have over delivery than,
Thank
you know.
Di. Thank you, Di. So
Yeah.
anyway, you got inspired, Jack, by that to have the conversation, which is our topic today, about separation in freestyle. So give it up for our illustrious guest, Di, today, who started this conversation that she didn't even know she was starting about separation in freestyle. And that's why Di is our guest today. So give it up for Di. Whoop, whoop.
Whoop, whoop.
And
All right,
Di,
don't
before we
jump
get into the topic of separation, I know you a little bit. I think Dre probably knows you much better than I do, but many of our listeners may not know who you are. Can you just tell them a little bit about yourself in terms of like, where do you live? What's like your home club?
Your dogs.
Maybe your dogs and what you love about disc.
Okay. I'm Di Matteson. I live right outside of Frederick, Maryland. And as we speak, the second set of sod is going down in our field right now. I was afraid they were going to arrive when we were on here and the dogs were going to go ballistic, but they're already there. So that's a good thing. I joined kind of the disc crowd Augie was born in 21. So probably like late 2022, early 2023. Little known fact that I attended the Skyhounds World Championship in Chattanooga when Rue played with
Wallace?
Wallace, yes,
Yeah.
Because
That was a while. That was a long time
that
ago.
was a real long time ago. And you guys were in a stadium, I think, in Chattanooga. It was downtown and everything.
AT&T Stadium, and
Yeah.
that whole thing has a whole lot of stories about that at that venue. That was
Yep.
crazy that year.
So I went because at that time I owned a pit bull named Snorkel, and Snorkel had bad hips, and I really wanted to support pitties in games and sports and everything. And I even went on to be on a board of a local 501c3 group advocating for pitties and all kinds of fun stuff. So that was kind of like my foray into kind of disc and seeing you guys for the first time. You guys may have even been there.
We were there.
I'm
Yeah.
sure we both were, yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't know who you were then. Anyways, so that was Snorkel. Snorkel's no longer with us. My training business is named after her because I learned a lot from her and about dogs and all that kind of fun stuff. So currently I have 2 disc dogs, Augie, which Dre has not a litter mate, but a half brother of Augie. He's a mini American border collie mix, and then also I have Dino, which he is a ACB border collie Aussie mix, and he's my bigger dog. And that's a whole nother story because he was supposed to be little and now he's bigger, but actually he's helping me get in shape. So that's a good thing. Yep. Then I have a little Jack Pitty pug mix, and that's Scud. And you guys have probably seen her around, and she's also my set dog. You've probably
A lot
seen
of commercials
with Chewy and Vital Essentials and a lot of different commercials. And Augie's done some set work as well. And then I have one lone house troll, which you guys may or may not. That's Juji, and there she is. And she's she doesn't go with us. She's a pity, and she just can't handle all the excitement of this thing. So we call her a house troll, but she gets a lot of love and attention here and loves to hike and everything here. So that's where I am. That's kind of like my shtick. My husband Bob plays with the boys as well in long distance.
He got enrolled. He got roped into the sport.
He did get roped in,
yeah.
But well, he played ultimate. We met playing ultimate, so there's a little history of disc in our past. And freestyle is my thing. I suck at the games. But now that I have a field,
you're really good at one of them.
Well, but now that I have a field, you guys won't be able to be like, die, buck up. You have a field to practice on. So anyways.
All right. Well, thank you, Di. I didn't know some of that stuff. That was interesting. And so now let's get back to our topic, Dre, our topic of separation. Yes. Every time I say our title of our podcast, when I was typing up notes the other day, and as I was thinking about it last night, I don't know if I'm the only one, but I always hear that Offspring song. You gotta keep them separated or whatever. You know that song?
Yes, I do know that song.
Okay, I don't know why it always just pops.
You think about that when you think about the podcast?
No, when I think about this topic.
This topic.
Oh. Whoa, we could play a little. You're editing this, so you could just like put a little strip of maybe at the end. Maybe that'll be our secret sound at the end.
Yeah, I have to keep it less than like 7 seconds or something, or else it gets flagged by copyright.
For stealing. All right, so tell us a little bit about Jack. Start us off with your question about separation.
All right. So yeah. So first of all, when we say separation in freestyle, like let's just talk a little bit about, well, what does that mean? What are we talking about? What is separated from what? Like there's obviously in freestyle, you've got a human, you've got a dog, and you've got disc. So what is this separation thing? Dre, do you want to start us off on that? Like what do you think separation is?
Sure. So, and one of the things I like to say to preface any freestyle conversation is we're talking about throwing extruded plastic and we're on an iron rock hurling through space. So like we're just playing frisbee here. There's no right answer. This is not rocket science. There's, you know what I mean? There's not going to be like somebody coming back like, you're wrong. It's all made up.
Well, there might be.
So exactly. So if somebody comes up and says you're wrong, this is all made up. Just tell them, we're just throwing plastic here. You could just chill out, guys. But separation and freestyle to me is the distance between the disc in your hand, or the time difference between the disc delivery and your hand. So I was actually thinking when you asked that question, I should jump up and run to the living room, grab a disc, and come back as a better example. So I can do that while one of you guys are talking. But basically, if I was to throw something, let's say the dog's mouth is right here, and I throw it right here and the dog catches it, you might only have an inch or two of separation there. Where a great example would be thinking about Jack and Ferris, or me and Moxie vaulting. We both had a lot of separation in our vaults with those dogs. When we would throw a vault, maybe our body would be placed like this, and you might see the disc all the way up there, and then the dog is still back behind us. And so that separation might be like 10 or 12 feet between the space of the disc and the dog. And being able to reliably deliver a disc with enough spin to be able to sit up there on the wind, not get blown around, and hold position and land at the right spot for the dog to get there at the right time is a skill. And the more separation that you can have to a certain point between your disc and the dog's mouth and your hand moves the difficulty factor up and down the scale, if that makes sense. And of course, there's a million different tricks and a million different applications. And so sometimes having too much separation could be a bad thing. But I think in general, if you're playing really closely and you're throwing and your dog is catching right there, you're going to get a lower ingenuity or difficulty score than you would if you had a greater distance for something, that same exact move, and maybe you had a couple feet in between your throw and your hand and your disc versus being right up against the dog. It just the disc has to fly on its own. It has to float on its own. It has to be stable in the wind. It has to be at the right angle at the right timing, versus if you're doing it really close to your dog's face, none of those things really come into play. So that's my answer for separation of disc.
And these are like the for our freestylers listening, these are like the nuances too. Like when this is not something for like a brand new beginner that it's going to be worried about their separation between the disc and the dog. But as I start getting some more skills and I start looking at ways to get more points, like Dre said, that can increase your difficulty level, increase your ingenuity in some of your tosses. And when you do that too, it's going to impact your dog score because your dog is going to look flashier. Your dog is going to be able to showcase their athleticism. Like if I'm doing a flip toss and I'm throwing the flip right down into my dog's mouth and they basically just kind of catch and just do a little flip, but they're not leaping up for it. They're not rotating in the air. They're not going to look as dynamic. My dog score is not going to be as high either. So it impacts your human score and your dog score. And it just gives you an opportunity for your dog to showcase that athleticism.
Yeah, so Di, I know when we originally invited you, or I originally invited you to this episode and told you what it was about, you're like, I don't know that I know it, blah, 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 blah. So we don't want you to have the right answer, but we are interested in hearing, like, when you heard separation of disc and then the time between then and here, thinking about it, like, what does separation mean to you?
All kinds of notes I wrote down.
Oh, good.
Well, first of all, so what really got it thinking is Jack's. So when I won the online Halloween freestyle thing, we were able to get our routines reviewed by you guys. And so Jack gave me some really good feedback about how Augie's a dynamic dog, but I don't always get a nice separation from him. So how I could elevate my game is putting the flip up higher, because I'm knocking on wood, 9 times out of 10, he's a very safe lander. Safe lander? Yeah. Land safely. One of those things. And how to adjust my score is putting out the disc for him to go to versus kind of feeding it to him. Mm-hmm. So I had I'm not a risk taker. So a lot of times I like to make completion versus putting it out there. So the feedback I got from him is that I actually need to kind of put it out there, put it up higher so that I can get the nice rotation and everything. So that's been playing in my mind a lot lately. And then with the vaults, I don't have great vaults, you guys, so I'm working on them. And a lot of, when I'm watching a lot of the great players, I notice that the dog's jumping to a target versus putting the hand up and the dog intercepting it, basically.
Yeah, like sometimes you see a vault and the disc is coming up to the dog's mouth and the dog is already there, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Versus the disc being there and then the dog going to where the disc is
leaping to it. Exactly. Yeah. And so I think a lot of that plays into Augie's a pushy dog, very pushy dog. And it's me panicking, trying to get it up, and he's already going. So it's more of a clash. He might make a great catch and it looks good, but it's not proper form and it can fail more often than not. So having him jump to the target, and I think Jack had shared with me, like Ron Watson was always talking about jumping to the target, giving the dog something to go to versus throwing it in the dog's mouth. So that's kind of what I've been working on in my head with Augie, but I also wanted to touch upon, the dogs might start barking. I also wanted to touch upon, you were talking about young players and dogs and everything. With Dino, I don't have a lot of separation, and I was rewatching a video of mine lately, but I don't want to get too much separation with him because he's so freaking lanky and his body, his proprioception is horrible right now, and he's just turning 2. And if I put it up there too much, or if I make him really try to leap for it, he's going to land awful. And so I have to learn kind of like a medium thing of where to put the disc, where keeping it safe because he's young and he's just flails everywhere, but also trying to make it nice and not have it be a take. So each dog and each team are different as well of where you want to do it. So like newbies shouldn't feel like they have to keep up with all the people that have all the dogs that have great flips and great vaults and everything, because the main thing of this all is keeping the dog safe and having fun. Sorry, that was a long thing there.
So,
That was interesting.
so I know, like, and I'll toss it right back to you, Dre, but I just want to like get in my head because you mentioned two things that I think we can like follow up on with discussion. And one of them is the safety factor, which I don't know if that's what you're going to speak to, Dre. And so it's kind of like, well, how do you build towards getting this separation? Because like you said, you just don't grab a new dog or a new handler and just automatically just start chucking the disc out there on these far vaults and expect it to work out. And then the second thing I don't want to forget to come back to is the notion, Di, that you talked about, playing it safe and, you know, getting completions versus what those completions look like. I'd like to revisit that, but let's talk about the safety part, Dre. Is that where you were going to go?
Yeah, I think it's an important distinction because it's like we mentioned at the very beginning, like if you're new at disc, don't worry about this part yet. Just work on, you know, your throws and your floaters being good and communicating with your dog and building a base of tricks and all that stuff. Just work on your basics. What we're talking about really is fine details of when you already have your freestyle routine and you're trying to get better scores. So if you're trying to improve your score, this is one of those minutia areas that fills all the space between all your different moves. So like it's not just applying to vaults or one move, it fills the space between everything, is the separation between each move. And so what she spoke to is between an adult dog that's physically fully developed versus an adolescent dog that's learning freestyle and learning moves, but you know his body, he's a male dog under 3 years old, and you know, and so he still has hormones that are going to develop his physical body. His chest not dropped yet. He's, you know, his shoulders and his joints are still going to be a little bit looser. He's not fully put together yet. And so for a dog like that, you don't really want to start pushing big athleticism. You want to work on their balance and their control and their proprioception and their body awareness. So like you even want to work on balancing on yoga balls and the dog being able to go from, you know, a set point into a focused vault point with control. You really don't want to work on increasing the difficulty in the separation until the dog has good body control. Now, how do you get from where you are, adolescent dog maybe doesn't have the body control, athleticism, to being working on separation of hand? A lot of that stuff for me happens with takes, with the disc in a very specific position to encourage the dog to build the strength and proprioception to be able to jump the way that we want them to jump, to be able to catch the disc with the athleticism. But like if that stuff's not there, that's like me saying go out and do 10 wall walks. Like you might need to start with push-ups first. Like you can't just throw a dog into a wall walk and expect them to do it without falling over, injuring themselves, you know, putting too much pressure on one part of the body if it's not prepared for that type of movement. So I think what stuck out for me from what Di was saying is that for a younger dog or an adolescent dog that's learning the game of freestyle, don't worry so much about separation from hand. You really want to think about that more when you have a dog that already knows the basic move and you're trying to expand their athleticism or expand your wow factor in your routine. Then we start really opening up to the dog understands the basic move of vault. Now we can push it out and ask for them to push their body a little bit more off of the platform and have a little bit more power and collection. And then they get used to that small improvement. Then they build the muscle and the proprioception for that improvement, and then you can move on to the next move. So that's kind of what I got from it. It's not to push the young dogs so much. And if you want to train that behavior to do it with a static disc that isn't in motion, like a take, to train how to be able to move their body with that sort of control. But I wouldn't start with just like throwing something higher or further.
I wanted to ask a question and then also chime in on something that you're saying there about not starting there. So a word that both you and Di have used a couple times today, and I just want to ask you guys to define it for me and also for our listeners. So the word I think is proprioception. Is that right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about like, well, what do you mean by that? Like, what is that?
Di, do you want to answer what you think it is, or do you want me to answer?
I mean, we actually,
Why
if
don't
we
you go
have,
first because
all
you're here
right.
as our guest.
So like proprioception to me and what I've learned in just like the pet dog arena is your butt follows your front end. So it's more of like a collection. So it's kind of like chewing gum and walking at the same time, or doing whatever this is called at the same time. So one part of your body follows the other part of the body, so it's not so janky when you're doing some sports stuff. So the dogs, so like Dre was talking about the yoga ball, and so like I like to do putting a paws up on a food bowl and then having the dog rotate around it and learning how to move their hips from one way and then increasing it to the other way. So, any type of spins and I don't even know, kind of like paw pads and stuff. So like I have a lot of the peanuts that I'll put my dogs on, and just even helping them learn how to balance. So proprioception to me kind of encompasses the body and the brain working together. So Dre can probably elaborate some more on that.
Just for I don't know, information purposes, I went ahead and Googled it so we can have an actual definition. So proprioception is the body's ability to sense its position, movement, and orientation in space. So it's a sixth sense that's crucial for balance. Now, you'll notice if you have a young dog maybe and they come up on your lap as a puppy, they may be imbalanced and you have to kind of brace their body. They might fall off, slip and fall off your lap, lose their balance, that kind of stuff. So a puppy might need proprioception practice to be able to balance on something like your lap, right? So the same applies for an adult dog that maybe has better proprioception for laps and running and all that because they've had more practice. But now we want them loading onto a specific platform, your leg, your back, whatever, and then rocking back their weight and pushing with their back legs. That's not at all a natural thing for dogs to do. Like, they're not going to naturally do a collected upward leap. When you see them running in the wild, when they're, on a hike or something like that, and they're jumping over something, they're typically jumping over and then going head down. They're not head up for a target. So it changes their body balance. It changes their body awareness. It changes their balance. It changes how they land, how they push off, all that stuff. So we're literally, it's like gymnastics for dogs. We're teaching gymnastics for dogs, and we want their weight shift in a very specific place. We want their push off in a very specific place. We want them landing a very specific way, front then back. We don't want them forefoot landing. We don't want them rear landing. So if you look at like gymnastics for humans, it's very similar to for disc dog freestyle, what we're asking the dogs to do. And so for a lot of those moves, we're spotting them through the movement so that their body can get the proprioception without the danger of having a bad landing. So you're not going to ask a young gymnast to do a backflip without spotting them through the backflip. You're going to have a coach there that's holding a part of their body, moving them slowly through the movement, and then getting their body used to the landing and the balance. And so that's exactly what we're doing with disc dog when we're using takes. We're holding this in a static position. We're triggering it for the dog. They can see it. They can see in their brain that there's this thing they're supposed to get, and they have to figure out how to get their body to do that. And sometimes there's a delay of 1 or 2 seconds while the dog's like looking at the disc, trying to figure out how to do it. And if the disc is moving, they can't do that process. They're just going to follow the disc. They're just going to wing themselves through it. But if you give them a static item there they can focus on and then process how to do it, it gives them the opportunity to kind of focus their brain on their body balance and explosion and to get that move done. But without the basics and the spotting and the careful body preparation, like you said, Dino might not land very well. Like, he can explode up for something, but he maybe doesn't have the proprioception yet to know to put his feet down at the right time when his body's doing something new and different, because he's just a loose body dog. Now, you might have a dog that's 6 months old that has a tighter body. Like, Jack, you've had some really collected dogs. Spice was one of them, right? Where like she just had great body collection and proprioception from a very young age. He really didn't have to worry about that. So there's a really long spectrum, and it depends on the dog and how they're put together and the handler and their experience and what kind of foundation you put on the dog and what type of balance exercises you're doing, like the ones you were talking about, Di, to kind of prepare your dogs for, being able to handle differences in footing and differences in landings, stuff like that.
So you guys tell me if I'm off base here, but like, especially when Di was doing this thing with rubbing her head and her stomach at the same time. So we're talking about the dog's proprioception, if I'm saying that word correctly, but also like, especially with some of the things that we're talking about, like vaults, there's a human proprioception that's happening as well. Like
Yep.
I'm
For
I'm
sure.
I'm moving, I'm going down, and then I'm also throwing the disc. And
Up, yeah.
if I don't have a lot of like athletic history in terms of doing something like that, yeah, that's going to be a really hard
Go
task
up
for
while you go
me.
down is really hard for people. And so that's one of the major problems with vaulting is that people go down and then throw up and then they're late.
Right. That's what I was going to
So,
say. Yeah. So like, so as much as we are taking baby steps, for lack of a better term, I guess a better way to describe it would be lowering the criteria and slowly raising it, right? As our dog gets better at understanding this vaulting motion, the same thing we should be doing, right? We should be practicing
practicing or
that
throwing.
little dish
Yeah.
toss. We should be then practicing it, bending our knees, like, you know, at the same point as our dog is learning these things, especially if you're a new handler, um, you're learning this stuff, right?
Yep. Yep.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So the other thing I wanted to bring up too was like we talked about how, and Dre, I completely agree that these are like kind of the higher level minutia of like, when you're getting into like an updog scoring, if you're getting into the fours, these are the differences between getting a 4 and getting a 4.25
Yep.
or a 4.5 or something.
Yep. Absolutely.
It's not the difference between getting a 2 and getting a 2.5. Like that's not, this is for players that have already got a good foundation down and they're looking to raise their game. But I was thinking one of the things we talked about separation with like a flip or like a vault, but also too, and maybe I'm just interpreting it a little bit different. You guys tell me what you think. But say I've got a trick toss, say I've got like a behind the back toss or something that I'm working on. Like I do think that there's some separation involved there too. Like, am I throwing that behind the back toss to a dog that's stationary, standing right in front of me 2 feet away?
Waiting, or are they running at you?
Or am I throwing it to a dog, cutting across the field and I'm throwing it 7 yards out? Like I have created much more separation with my throw. It's now a more challenging throw. And it's a more challenging catch. Well, actually, I mean, it may or may not be.
Technically, it's
It
an easier
actually gives
catch.
my dog more time
Yeah.
to react on the 7 yard catch.
It's a more
But
advanced level catch because the dog has to be able to track, collect, catch. It showcases a higher level of skill for the dog and handler.
so in other words, like from my perspective, teams that have like a good foundation could start their separation just on things like that. Like you
Yep.
don't have to be worried about like taking it to the vaults and the flips yet, but just get that separation on some of those fancier throws that you've been throwing that we see the TikTok throws where the dog is like standing right in front of the human, and then for that 5 seconds in time that yeah they got a great catch, but the dog was set up right in front of the human.
Waiting.
The human probably took like 34 takes before it actually happened the right way, and then you're like woo. But can you do that further away? Can you do that with a moving dog? All of those things I think are related to this concept of separation that we're talking about.
Yep. Yep. You nailed it, Jack. I agree. I would agree with that. All many variables to increase the difficulty. And the highest level difficulty would be hitting the dog in interception with nice separation. And how we modify or scale that would be to have the dog either be slower or in a set position, and then have the handler be in a static and set position without a lot of movement in their vault. And then add more difficulty as you kind of get that baseline. With my dog sitting and me still, I can execute a leg vault with nice separation. Okay, now do a setup move first. Do a hit it and then the leg vault. Can you still get nice separation then? And then add the rest of your set in. So just like with the dogs, we need to give ourselves kind of baby steps to get into the movement because we are half of the package. So we're not just training the dogs, we're training our own movements, and we can have all the dog stuff trained right. And if we don't get our movement right, there's no point. So it's just as important to go out there. And as much as I'm the person, I prefer going out and playing with my dog versus just going out and throwing by myself. I would say the first maybe 5, 6, 7 years of my career, I did a lot of throwing by myself for vaulting and for toss and fetch throws, just a lot. The vault toss, like just your regular floater toss and your backhand throw, I think are the two most important throws in disc that need to be practiced a lot. And everything else is whatever. It's throws that are easy for you or hard for you. You avoid the ones that you don't like and you stick with the ones that you do, right? But in general, those are the two throws you're going to need throughout freestyle no matter what. You're going to need a 40-yard toss and fetch throw, and you're going to need consistent floaters from different positions of your body. For flips, overs, dog catches, vaults, all those use a floater.
So, so we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I'd like to kind of revisit it just to make sure it's clear for folks too. Di, not too long ago, you were in our freestyle judging class, right?
Class. Yeah.
And Dre has been in that class many times as an instructor, and at some point this topic comes up and we talk about it, and a lot of times it comes up during the human category. So in updog freestyle judging, of course, we know that we have dog, human, and team judges for the criterion round. And so if we have a team that is showcasing some of these skills that we're talking about, and they are increasing the separation between the dog and the disc, and we're seeing that, where are we likely to see those increases in scores? We mentioned a couple places already. Like we mentioned, Dre, I think you said ingenuity and throw difficulty, right?
Yep.
What are some other places, Di, can you think of any other places, or Dre, that we would see some increases in scores? Because of course, if I'm listening to this podcast and I'm saying, all right, cool, if I start doing this
category,
where am I going to start seeing some extra points come my way? I think it can actually fall in a few other places as well.
Yes.
I don't know specifically where it would fall under because I don't have a score sheet in front. Oh, yes, I do. But it's like, personally, I would think like in team, somewhere in team, because you're working better as a team. You're elevating yourselves together versus just showcasing the dog. But that's one place I could think of, and I don't know what category it would fall.
I mean, that's interesting. Yes, in the team let's look at all the categories, right? Because it's going to impact all the categories. So for the team category, how could it impact the team category? Just tell us a little bit about that. Versus not having it.
So you talked about team connectedness, Di. That is one of the skills listed there. And I think the way in which you described it definitely would fall under team connectedness.
Yep. That's exactly where I would put it under that for team. And then for human, it would be under throw placement and flight.
Yep.
And also think about tricks. Like if
tricks was the one I was going to say. Yeah.
These are all we've just been talking about vaults and flips and all those things. These are our tricks, right? And if I can make my dog look more dynamic, if I can make the trick look more dynamic or more difficult because of the separation, that's going to get me a higher trick score.
Right.
What about the dog?
I mean, there's almost all of it.
So a dog, if we go to the dog, we've got
catch.
Like Dre's already mentioned collection and control.
Yeah.
Collection and control, athleticism.
Drive. Does the dog drive?
Drive. They're going to get it, right?
To control their drive. They can't so you know how Augie will go out and pre-jump something if it's high, right? As he matures as a dog, he may make more thoughtful choices to collect on one of those high ones and give that 1 or 2 second chip collection. And as a judge, I'm going to give him a higher score for doing that versus pre-jumping. So that's and if there was no separation from hand, he wouldn't have the opportunity to pre-jump.
Right.
Because you'd be putting it right in his mouth, right? So like there's risk in all of these things. When we put up more separation, there's more risk. The disc is in the wind for longer. It's away from our hand for longer. It's further from our bodies for longer. It's a greater degree of difficulty for the dog also. But it allows more athleticism. It allows more ingenuity. It allows more creativity. It allows, more difficulty across the board.
Right.
So really, if you're talking like little quarter points, we just mentioned like 6 or 7 areas. So quarter point in each of those areas, and now I've got 2 points on somebody else that maybe isn't doing this, isn't trying to create that separation in their throws. And 2 points in freestyle can be a big separator.
Yeah. Huge. And that's one of the things, that I talked to, I know Di has heard that had heard me say this before, but one of my strategies or approaches for freestyle is to try to be a big fish in a smaller pond. So I'm looking to see where the weaknesses are, where the gaps are that most other teams are missing. What are most other teams not good at? And then I want to be good at that. So, because everybody's going to have flips, overs, dog catches, vaults in their routine. Like everybody's going to have out throws. Everybody's going to have alternate out throws. How do you, in a game where we're all playing the same thing, how do you separate yourself? And for me, it would be to find whatever general weakness in the pool of people that I'm competing against, where are areas that they're not great? And then can I excel in those areas? Separation of hand is one of those areas that just like not many people are putting specialized intent into having that area be presented better, right? And across the board, you can have a 2 to 3 point advantage just by executing that well straight across the board. One detail, one little thing. So I think that, yes, you could elevate a trick that, and I've done that, elevate a trick that no one's done before. And you get a boost for that kind of stuff. But you get a boost in one category for that. And maybe you get like dog athleticism. Maybe you get, if it's a tricky release or something, you might get something for the handler's release. But if you were to take on a concept like separation from hand, it contributes many categories across the board. So you'll see more of a significant increase in your overall difficulty and presentation versus elevating one specific thing. And you could spend the same amount of time working on one specific creative trick or elevating your separation from hand. It could potentially take the same amount of investment, but the result for a separation from hand would be further reaching across your score, I think.
Yeah, like that little mental exercise there that Dre just kind of went through. Like, if I do this, where are all the little places that I'm going to get a bump? That's absolutely like, the best way to go about it. Like, just be thinking, if I did this, we always tell our teams, you got to find your points, right? And you got to find your points because you're not going to be able to do everything that, like, I'm not going to be able to do everything that Dre can do. I'm not going to be able to do everything Di can do, but what can I do well that's going to impact across multiple areas so that I maximize whatever it is I'm working on?
And then what you end up doing is stuff that you're good at, which ultimately is more fun. So like you can spend most of your time like struggling through stuff you're not great at, but you're not going to enjoy that.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, you're not going to enjoy that process as much. And remember, the whole reason why you signed up for this was for your own entertainment. Like people forget about that. They spend years or decades in a sport and they forgot the whole reason why they started it was for their own personal enjoyment. And so if at any point you're not enjoying something, you could just stop doing that thing and go back to doing the thing that you enjoy because that's the whole reason you're here, right? It's really easy to kind of lose focus on the initial vision of why you started this thing. And so to do things inside of your own personal strengths, not only, again, contributes to your ingenuity and personal style, but it gets you out of that rut of feeling like you have to do things that aren't necessarily in your strengths.
And it is called freestyle. So as much as sometimes you may feel like, well, I have to do this, I've got to do a flip, or I've got to do a vault, or I've got to, no, you don't. You don't have to. You can bail on it and you can go, you know what? I'm not doing those things. I'm going to try this other over here. It is Dre knows, like I had a dog that I never did a vault with and we were pretty competitive. And so it's called freestyle. Like Dre said, make it fun, do it however you want to do it. That's one of the things I like about you, Di, is like you set yourself apart with some of the ingenuity components that you bring into it and the creativity. And, I can tell that that's just you and your personality, and it comes across in your performances that, like, you're enjoying it. And it's not anything that, like, I do, like, I don't look at your routine and go, I got to do that. Because I know I'm not going to be able to do some of the things that you do, but I'm going to do something different. And I'm going to stand out in a different way because that's what freestyle is all about.
So, Jack, as a player, how do I push myself to include better separation? Like, how do I start this process? Like, this sounds great, everybody. I want to have better separation in my play. How would you start? Let's start with Di. What do you think? What's one or two things that you would do if you heard this conversation and you had never heard it before? and you wanted to level up your game a little bit, where would you start to add more separation?
I have Jack in my head, first of all.
Okay.
But so if someone told me that I needed more separation in my dog's flips to be more dynamic, I'm learning to video myself more often and go back and watch. So, for instance, putting the disc out there and kind of seeing where I've released it, whether it's kind of flat and horizontal and the dog is just kind of taking it out of my mouth, versus like maybe trying to put it up further with more of a flick on it. I don't have good wrist flick, so I'm working on my wrist flick more to give it a better spin if it does go higher. So I think I would video myself first, look at where all flips, vaults, tricks, where I could get separation and see how close the dog is first. And then I don't always practice what I preach. So I'm preaching, I'm not practicing right now. I would pick one thing to work on. So like I would pick a specific flip first. And that way you're getting to be successful at one thing. You're not trying to do it all at one time, because when you do it all at one time, you get really frustrated. Ask me how I know. So I mean, that's, I think, hopefully, maybe did I do okay?
Great job. What do you think, Jack?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd want to find something that I'm somewhat comfortable with first, because I always have in the back of my head the safety thing, and I want to keep my dog safe, and I don't want to put them at risk of getting injured or anything like that. So I don't want to like put my dog in a situation where I'm not comfortable doing the thing yet, and then now I'm putting my dog into the picture. So I want to practice something that I'm comfortable with. So meaning I might have to take a step back and try pushing this throw out a little bit further without my dog first. And I like what Di said about videotaping things. Videotape your throws too, and so that you can see, all right, that one was about where I needed it. The next three were not. What was I doing differently with my hand? You really can. And it doesn't take a long time. Like, you watch the video after you take it, and within 3, 4, 5 minutes, you can see, okay, I need to get more of an angle on it. And then I get that throw down myself. And now I bring my dog in, now that I feel like I've got that throw where I want it to be. That way I'm not putting my dog at risk as I'm figuring crap out. Like, I should figure stuff out, and then I should bring my dog in. Especially on something that's like a vault or a vault toss or something like that. Now, if it's something like we talked about, like I'm doing a behind the back toss, and I have been doing it with my dog static right in front of me, and now I want to try bringing them across. That's a little bit safer because it's I can, well, depending on how good you are with your behind the back toss, I guess that could be one of those things you want to practice first. I'm thinking about in my head, I know I'm pretty proficient with that. It would just be a timing thing, getting that throw out there quicker. So I guess my final answer, Dre, is I would start with something that I am comfortable with, because then the only thing changing is pushing that toss out and challenging my dog to go and get it. I don't want to have so many new things going on that I put my dog at risk perhaps, and also like I'm not able to figure out what went wrong if I've got so many new things happening.
Yep. Yeah. So that's kind of related to what Di said also about like picking something that you're comfortable with and only doing that one thing and not doing a bunch of things at one time, because it'll get overwhelming. Hard to keep your points of performance clear if you're doing too many things at one time. I would say for me, the question was like, where would I start? If I was starting with this concept, the first thing that came to me was starting with a multiple. I feel like that's just one area where almost every new player does a multiple right in front with their dog, and their dog is forging into them, and they're doing it in this circle, right? Where the dog's just forging and they're going around in a circle. And then pretty much there's no separation from hand. Like they're doing it like this and the dog's biting it right away. So I like starting that was the first thing that came to me was I would put my dog in a sit and depending on the dog, maybe on a climb or a cato for position because that tells them not to forge forward, right? It at least gives them the concept of it. And then take a step back and do your multiple. And practice like being able to push the disc towards the dog and the dog not forging in at the timing. So I think part of the problem with people getting separation is their dog goes too early or their aho, right? Like the dog doesn't wait for the right time to go, or they're not clear on when the right time to go is. Like as soon as the person moves the disc, the dog is going. That's not the right time to go. The right time to go is when you throw the disc, right? But the time between pulling out your disc, putting it in position, and moving it, the dog is already going. Then it's going to be hard to get separation from hand because the dog is already taking an action.
We
So
need to
I
do
would start.
a whole nother thing on
We
triggers.
could. We probably could. Yeah.
Ugh.
And timing, because that's such an important element. So I would start with something simple, like a multiple right in front of me, where I would ask the dog to take the cue, catch. I would slowly flatten it, and then I would throw it the right time into my computer. And that would make it more clear to the dog they hold position until it's time to execute. And I find like that when I'm working with students, I find like that's really the hardest part is that the dog is not clear exactly when to go. And so they tend to go as soon as the handler moves their body or as soon as they move the disc. And the handler needs more time to be able to execute something to a space. So I would start with something in front, simple, where the dog gets more clear about when to go. And then as you start to throw, it shouldn't really matter what your separation of hand is if the dog is waiting for the right time to go.
All right, can I go back and revisit something that Di brought up like a half an hour ago?
Go for it.
I just think it's a cool like I get analytical about things, and so when you are trying to get those extra points, sometimes there's a balance of things because as you try to get these additional points by challenging yourself as a thrower and challenging your dog with their athleticism and their ability to collect and really push off and get to that disc, as those things get higher, sometimes the catch ratio gets lower because now I've increased the challenge for both myself and my dog. And so there's always this balance of like, well, I want to just complete the thing and meaning get a catch, right? Because that's what complete the thing is in disc dogging. My dog is catching. And then making that completion look amazing versus it just happened, right? I did it, but how did it look, right? So that balance there of getting the catch, getting the completion versus I'm going to push myself a little bit as a thrower. I'm going to raise the difficulty level. I'm going to challenge my dog and showcase my dog's abilities. My question for you guys is just like, where do you guys find that balance? Like, where do you always just go for it? Who cares? I get the catches or I don't. Does it change depending upon a scenario or a situation? Like, what are y'all's thought processes about that balance?
You want to go first, Di, or want me to go?
You go first.
So for me, I'm confident in my ability to make the throw. So
All right, well, there you go.
it wasn't always that way, but now as the player that I am, I feel comfortable that I'm able to make the throw. So I'm able to give my full focus to my dog. So I would change one move. I would get it to 85, 90% success, and then I would work on another move. And then I would get it to 85, 90% success, and then work on another move. So I would take it one move at a time. But because I've been playing for a while, I'm not worried about my ability to put it at the right angle, the right time, the right distance. So like I only have half the challenge. For somebody new, and I say this a lot, if you're a new player and you have a new dog, it's very hard. It's just hard because you're both learning. And so you're both making the normal mistakes that you would normally make. And because you're making a mistake as a human, it's confusing your dog. So like there's always going to be the first dog or first two dogs is always going to be a more arduous process to take on a task like this because there's more variables you have to learn. And as somebody who's had, 30 dogs or 25 dogs or something like that I've trained at this point, you start to get a baseline of foundation that you build as soon as you meet the dog and you kind of work these things in. And so that when it comes time to do those things, they learn it with a close placement and then you just sort of bump it out. And so they learn it with separation. Coming in as somebody who doesn't know, and a dog who doesn't know, I would learn the basic of the trick with a take, and then I would work on my own placement separate from the dog, and then I would bridge the two. And I would do it
So,
one trick at a time, get it to 85, 90%, and then roll it into my routine.
right.
Add it into flow, get that segment going, and then change another element. Did that answer your question?
Yes, and the thing that I heard, because I want to repeat this for other folks to hear it, if I heard get it to 85 to 90% and then go on to the next thing. So
Mhm.
again, this notion of I'm not trying to change everything all at once, and I want to get it to that high percentage before it becomes part of my competition freestyle, right? Did I hear
There's only
that
so many,
correctly?
yeah, there's only so much your brain can process at one time. You can have one linear line of thought at a time for most standard brains, right? And so if you're thinking about your execution of that move, you're not thinking about your dog, and you're not thinking about your time, and you're not thinking about your music, and you're not thinking about your use of the field, and you're not thinking about your body presentation, you're not thinking about your spin. You're just thinking about that move. And so if you have one of those in each of your segments, you're not present to your dog at all. So for me, it's fine to have three, four of those little, I call them sticky notes or flags in your freestyle, where there are moments where you need extra attention in order to have it go properly. Have three or four of those throughout your routine. And then that's enough for your brain to handle. But one of those three or four may be a move that you've been working on for a month or two that you have at 85 or 90%. Now try to execute it under stress. You're back to 60%. Right? So like you can add more stuff, but I wouldn't have more than three or four focus points in a routine. I mean, at a certain level, right? Again, if you're building your freestyle routine, you're going to have 30 focus points all the time. You're going to be overwhelmed all the time because that's freestyle until you get enough knowledge and pattern in your routine that some of it becomes automatic. Your brain can only have like hold a certain amount of information. So if you have maybe in your first set's done. It's practiced a lot. You're really confident with it. You want to be able to go out and execute that when you're nervous, no problem. Second set, maybe you have something new in there. You're going to have to be thinking about that new thing the whole time when you get into your second set, setting it up and going slower and preparing your dog, communicating and executing to try and get it successful. If you have one of those or two of those in every single set, you're not going to be in your self-expression. You're not going to be in your performance. You're not going to be in your showmanship. You're going to be in your head, right? So wherever you are, it depends on where you are and what your priorities are. If you're going into finals and you still have that many things, points of performance, I would drop two or three of those points of performance and just do things you can do so that you can actually be in the pocket. You could do some showmanship. You can remember your routine. You can focus on your dog. If you have, like right now, updiff is the beginning of the season for a lot of people because it's in the spring. So get updiff under your belt and then spend the next 2 or 3 months before the rest of the finals events come out, fine tuning more of those difficult tricks if they're not ready. But I wouldn't throw that many things inside and go to a competition and expect your brain to be able to process that because it's just not going to be able to do it successfully.
I want to add something to that for brain and processing things. So like this past weekend, we had an updiff prep. Was it my best freestyle? Not at all. And it was windy. I felt like I was back at updiff 2024. It was cold. It was rainy. The wind wasn't as bad, but it was there.
Mhm.
And in my brain, I had gone for strategic reasons. It wasn't my showmanship that I usually have and the fun and all that. I went for strategic, throwing in the wind, getting separation, moving around the field, and seeing where my gaps were. Had I the wind with disc separation adds a whole nother element as well. So like when we're talking about increasing separation, I think a lot of us, especially the newbies, we still like, oh, we got to throw it. So like in the wind, that adds a whole nother layer that we've got to learn how to get separation, keep our dog safe, because my hellion will actually try to catch something and twist his whole body and land. So so thinking about all that kind of stuff is hard. So if you are trying to elevate your game, which that's where I am right now, I might have been disappointed with this weekend, but I wasn't, because I went and did what I wanted to do, which was strategize. I did have someone come up to me afterwards and say, I look like I didn't have confidence. I wasn't smiling like I usually do and having fun and everything. And afterwards I was kind of like, and I watched it and I wasn't like, I didn't like talk to Augie when I was there. Like I was very methodical, and I'm not a methodical person. So sometimes you have to stretch yourself and it doesn't look pretty, and you're not going to win and you're not going to have good scores. And, you know, you got to rack it up as learning and move on. So this weekend I kind of dusted myself off and was like, yeah, well, okay. I went and did what I wanted to. The wind made me focus on separation, getting around the field. So I just want to tell new players that, like, if you are trying to do certain things, take and focus on one thing, and don't try to do everything. Don't try to go be that person out there that you're going to kick ass, because sometimes you're just not going to, and it's okay.
Yeah, especially if it's not your focus for that
Right.
round. Like your focus wasn't performance.
No.
And your performance wasn't great.
It wasn't.
Your wind play, you learned about the wind and you
Right.
learned about the use of the field. And when you're preparing for a big event, it's not just about showmanship.
No.
There's a lot of different elements, and you can't learn about all the different elements if you're not focusing on them, right?
Right. And I
that was
wasn't.
a great session, yeah.
Well, and I like what you said, Di, that when, you know, if everything goes smooth, you're not learning anything. When it's through challenges, through struggles, that we learn those things. And, you know, of course we want things to go 100% smooth when it's a big competition. That would be amazing. But when you're out there and you are like, hey, I'm going to take this to the competition field and try it out, you're almost like competing for a different purpose or a different reason at that point in time. So I think that's great. And I like the advice there.
Well, and again, it's a subjective sport. And so if we're always putting our value on what some other person in a chair thinks and there's no other way to measure it, it's going to be a short career for you, or at least a less satisfying one. One of the things that I love to tell people is that really that local judging really doesn't matter. It's a little bit of a guide for you, but for the most part, the people that are judging local events don't have a ton of experience. Maybe they don't have a ton of judging knowledge. They're volunteering their time for that weekend. And so if you have your own personal goals leading into your freestyle routine and you have your own focuses and you're recording your routine, you can get feedback from the judges, but that's not the only thing you're getting. You can measure the goals that you set before. Did you hit that criteria? Did you do the things that you said you were going to do? And then that's a lot of the information, is just what you intended to do when you went in. So you went into that round intending to work on use of the field and wind. And you weren't even thinking about performance. So like, okay, I don't expect my score for performance to be the same as like if you're walking into a performance round and all you're thinking about is your performance. That's different. Then maybe one of the other categories wouldn't have as much attention. But I bet you learned a lot about your use of the field, and you learned a lot about your plan for the wind. And that's part of the learning process and preparation for freestyle is learn, and having different focus points when we execute this training will gain us information about those specific focus points that you're not going to get if you're just looking at the whole general picture. You just won't see that much detail. So it's good to go practice random things. Focus on random things and see what you learn.
I think we could probably go on about this topic for another hour,
2 hours. Yeah.
Maybe we'll have like a separation part 2, or we've got all these little micro pieces that we talked about today too, as well, that we could dig into. Di, thanks so much for joining us. But before we let you go, if you've ever listened to the podcast, you know it's time for our time warp challenge.
Warp. All right, give it
I'm so excited. All right, I got my timer ready.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, you know how this game works. We're going to ask you 10 simple, fun questions. You have 1 minute to answer. The goal is to get all 10 questions done in that 1 minute time frame. So don't dilly-dally.
Don't think too much. Just first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can pass. If you like literally don't have the answer, you can pass. We might heckle you for it, but you still might finish on time. So that's more important. Ready?
I'm ready.
Are you ready, Jack?
I'm ready.
All right, ready, set, go.
All right, Di, what's one thing that you can never seem to find when you need it?
My glasses.
There you go. If you had a time machine, would you rather go back in time or to the future?
Oh, yeah. Back in time.
Okay.
What's your favorite dog disc to throw?
Hers right now, but yeah, go on.
Would you rather read a book or watch a movie?
Watch a movie.
Name 3 90s musical groups.
30 seconds.
Bon Jovi, White Snake, and I don't know, the Backstreet Boys.
Okay,
What's one of those was from the 90s?
Whatever. What's something that people would be surprised to know about you? 14 seconds.
I don't know. I'm from West Virginia.
Oh, that's a good one.
All right. What is a good garage sale or clearance sale find?
3 seconds.
A saw.
Time. A saw?
Oh,
Like you picked up a saw somewhere?
yeah, like because Bob picked up this past weekend. One of our neighbors put out like this big table saw. And
Oh, that's a good find.
I mean, so it's in our garage right now.
All right, so you did not complete our time warp, but we're going to give you the last few questions just for fun. So
Okay.
what's your favorite Updog game?
Oh,
Thank you! Freestyle! All right.
All right. Next question. Pajama pants in public. Is this okay?
only at Updog events.
Only at Walmart.
Oh, no, not at Walmart.
What's your favorite condiment?
Mayonnaise.
Oh. It's good
All
to know.
right. That is the time warp
That was
challenge.
it. All
That was
right.
the time warp. Pretty
Cool.
good job. I think you got 7. Technically, it was before time. You got 6. But Jack, honestly, I think it's the 3 questions. Name 3 of anything. I think it's hard to get anything
It's
done.
hard. Like, yeah,
So,
like
I'm gonna submit a request that you can only ask for 1 answer per answer going forward for fairness of time warp, because that got me too. Is the 3 80s songs or
yeah, I
artists
mean,
or
Bon
whatever.
Jovi's in the 80s, I know, and White Snake is in the 80s, and I mean, is the Backstreet Boys in the 90s?
They were
Backstreet
90s.
Boys was 90s. Yeah.
Everybody
didn't
else
listen-
Cat would just like you saying, so it's fine.
What's
You made
that?
Kat happy. You made Cat happy because you picked 80s bands.
Yeah, Kat and I are like,
Yeah. Yeah. She's giving you a thumbs up.
yeah.
1 free missed run.
All right.
She's like, no.
No.
You guys are going to have to listen to our podcast on Tuesday to get that joke. But anyway, Di, thank you for taking time. I know you had a busy day today. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us for this podcast. And thanks also for the inspiration of the topic. Just a reminder for you guys, if you have ideas for topics for the podcast, we want to know what they are. Especially freestyle conversations. You bring any of those in, Jack and I are in for that conversation.
Absolutely.
So if you have ideas, you can reach out to me or Jack and pop those ideas also on the discussion page if you guys want to hear any particular topics on the podcast.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you, Di. Thanks, Dre, for co-hosting with me. This podcast is likely to come out after UpDiff. So if it's after UpDiff, we hope that you guys are hitting an Updog field in your local area soon. And in the meantime, Dre,
Be kind to each other.
and be kind to your dogs. See you guys next time.
Bye. Your butt follows your front end.